Welcome to Learn English by Daily. Today, we have an inspiring story that will take you on a journey of courage, hope, and determination. It's a story about a young boy named Daniel who lives in a small, poor village in a tiny house with broken windows and a dirt floor. Life is not easy for him. His mother works long hours, his father left long ago, and most nights, he goes to bed hungry. But Daniel has a dream that seems impossible. He wants to learn English, travel, and one day give his mother a better life. Every night, by the light of a small candle, he studies from a torn old book. He whispers words like hope, dream, and future, imagining a world that stretches far beyond the village streets. This story is not just about learning English. It is about believing in yourself, even when life feels unfair. You will see Daniel struggle with mockery, poverty, and fear, yet find ways to rise above it. You will feel the excitement of his small victories, the weight of his challenges, and the quiet strength that pushes him forward. Stay with us until the end, because Daniel's journey is a reminder that courage is not about money or comfort. It's about refusing to give up when life is hard. His story will inspire you, motivate you, and show you that even small steps every day can lead to big change. By watching and listening, you are not just learning English. You are learning the power of determination, hope, and a brave heart. Chapter 1. The Small House, the Big Dream. Daniel lived in a house so small that the walls seemed to lean closer with every passing year. The windows were cracked, letting cold air slip through in the mornings and evenings, and the thin wooden walls barely kept out the sounds of the village. The floor was nothing but dirt, uneven and dusty, and every footstep made a tiny cloud rise in the air. It was not much of a home, but it was all Daniel had, and he had learned to make it feel alive in his imagination. His mother worked endlessly, carrying baskets of wet laundry to and from neighbors' homes. Her hands were rough, her back ached, and yet she always tried to smile at Daniel, even when her eyes betrayed exhaustion. His father had left years ago, and Daniel rarely spoke of him. Sometimes when he saw other children with their fathers, a quiet ache filled his chest, but he quickly pushed it down, focusing instead on the small joys he could find in the day. Hunger was a familiar companion. Some nights, Daniel went to sleep with his stomach tight and empty. The scent of food from the village market teased him, but he could do little except dream of meals he had never eaten. And yet, in the darkness of his small home, a single treasure gave him comfort: a book. It was old, the cover frayed, and the pages yellowed and torn. It had probably been discarded by someone who no longer wanted it, but to Daniel, it was priceless. Every night, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the village grew quiet, he lit a tiny candle. Its flickering flame cast dancing shadows on the walls, illuminating the words he longed to understand. He held the book in his hands and whispered the English words he had memorized. Sometimes he stumbled over the sounds, sometimes the sentences felt too big for his young mouth, but he persisted. He read words like hope, dream, future, letting them roll off his tongue as if saying them aloud could make them real. In the quiet of the night, Daniel traveled to places he could not yet visit. He imagined cities filled with people who spoke in ways he did not yet understand, streets that smelled of spices and bread, and trains that could carry him far beyond the limits of his village. He imagined himself helping his mother, giving her a better life, and never again seeing her tired eyes weighed down by worry. These thoughts made him smile softly, a warmth in his chest that hunger and hardship could not touch. Even in the smallest of rooms, his mind felt wide and limitless. The walls of his house could contain his body, but they could not contain his dreams. Each page he read by candlelight planted a seed in his heart, a belief that life could be more than survival, that he could one day speak with confidence, travel to new places, and lift his mother out of struggle. And so, in that fragile house, amidst broken windows and a dirt floor, Daniel's heart carried a quiet, growing strength. Poverty surrounded him, hunger pressed in, and life was harsh, but the flickering flame of hope burned steadily, illuminating a path that he could not yet fully see. Each night, as he closed the book and blew out the candle, he whispered to himself, "One day, my life will be bigger. One day, I will show the world what I can do." And with that thought, Daniel drifted to sleep, his dreams stretching far beyond the walls that held him, waiting for the world outside to test his courage. Chapter 2. Laughter and Shame. The next morning, Daniel took his little English book to school. His heart pounded in his chest as he walked past the familiar faces of his classmates. Some glanced at him and smirked, whispering to each other. He knew what was coming, but he carried a small hope inside, a hope that maybe, just this once, someone would notice his effort. When the teacher asked a question in English, Daniel raised his hand. His fingers shook and his mouth felt dry. "My name is Daniel," he said, speaking slowly, each word deliberate. His accent was thick, his pronunciation imperfect, but he tried his best. For a moment, there was silence. Then a loud laugh erupted from the back of the classroom. One boy pointed at him, another repeated his words in a mocking tone, stretching the sounds into something silly. The room filled with giggles, whispers, and pointing fingers. Daniel's face burned, and he sank lower into his chair. The teacher, who had looked up from her papers, gave a tired sigh. "Daniel, sit down," she said. "English is not for boys like you. Focus on real work. Learn to help your family. Dreams do not feed hungry mouths." The words cut deeper than the laughter. Shame and humiliation wrapped around him like a heavy blanket. For a moment he wanted to disappear, to hide, to forget this silly dream that had cost him so much ridicule. But then, deep inside, a quiet voice spoke. It was soft, almost like a whisper in the corner of his mind, but it held power. One day, they will see. Daniel clenched his fists under the desk. The voice reminded him of the candlelight in his small house, of the words he had whispered at night. It reminded him that even if no one understood him now, there was a future where his effort would matter. When the school bell rang, Daniel walked out quickly, ignoring the giggles and the teasing voices that followed him. He wanted to cry, to let the embarrassment take over, but he held back. His chest ached, but inside a small ember of courage burned. That evening, Daniel sat by the small candle in his house, opening the torn book. The words on the page were the same ones his classmates had mocked, but now they felt stronger, almost like allies. He whispered them slowly, carefully, repeating them until they rolled smoothly off his tongue. The night was quiet, and for the first time, Daniel studied not to impress anyone else, not to prove himself to classmates or teachers, but for himself. The laughter from the classroom faded into the background. The candle flickered, casting long shadows on the wall, and Daniel felt a new kind of strength take root, one that came from quiet determination, not applause. The shame of the day lingered, but it no longer had the power to stop him. He had learned something important. Dreams could be private, powerful, and unstoppable, even when the world laughed at them. Chapter 3. Candlelight Lessons. Night had fallen over the village, and the quiet settled like a soft blanket. Most houses were dark, families asleep, the streets empty except for the occasional dog barking in the distance. But in Daniel's small home, a faint glow flickered. A candle burned low, its light trembling across the cracked walls, illuminating the torn pages of his little English book. Daniel sat on the dirt floor, legs crossed, his eyes focused on the words he had memorized. Hope, dream, future, he whispered, letting each word roll off his tongue slowly. The sounds were strange and new to him, but he repeated them again and again, as if speaking them aloud could make them real. Each syllable was a small victory, a quiet step toward a world he had not yet seen. Sometimes he stumbled. His tongue fumbled over unfamiliar words, and frustration crept in like a shadow. But he never gave up. He closed his eyes, breathed deeply, and started again. The candlelight danced on the pages, flickering like it was cheering him on. From the doorway, his mother watched quietly. She had returned from washing clothes late, her hands red and sore from the cold water, her back aching. She could see the lines of fatigue on her son's face, the way his body shook from hunger and exhaustion. Yet she also saw something stronger, a determination that no hardship could break. "Daniel," she whispered softly, stepping closer. "It is late. You should rest." He looked up at her and gave a small, tired smile. "Just a little more, Mama," he said. "I want to finish this page." She knelt beside him and placed her hand gently on his shoulder. "You are brave, my son." "Very brave," she said, her voice filled with both sorrow and pride. "Even when life is hard, you keep trying. That is what matters." Daniel nodded, feeling a warmth in his chest stronger than the candlelight. The darkness of the night could not touch the small flame inside him. Each word he spoke, each line he memorized, carried him a little farther from the poverty and hunger that surrounded him. Each whisper in the quiet room was a promise to himself. He would not stop. He would not give up. As he continued to practice, the night stretched around him, peaceful yet full of possibility. The words he had once feared now rolled more easily from his lips. Friend, help, future, dream. Each word was a brick, building a bridge from the small house he lived in to the larger world he longed to see. For Daniel, the candlelight was more than illumination, it was hope. It was the proof that even in darkness, determination could shine. And though he could not yet see what the future held, he felt ready to meet it. That night, as he closed the book and blew out the candle, Daniel's heart carried a quiet certainty. Hard work, persistence, and courage could change his life. The first step had been taken, and he knew that one day those words, whispered in the shadows, would open doors he had only dreamed of. Chapter 4. The Stranger in the Village. The sun hung high over the village, and the market buzzed with life. Vendors shouted the prices of vegetables and fruits. Children ran between the stalls, and the smell of fresh bread and spices filled the air. Daniel carried a small basket of potatoes for a neighbor, his arms heavy and his back aching, when something unusual caught his eye. At the far end of the market, a stranger had appeared. He was tall, with pale skin and a worn hat, looking confused as he held a crumpled map in his hands. His clothes were different from what Daniel usually saw in the village, and the words he spoke were fast and unfamiliar. The villagers stared, some shrugging, some laughing quietly at the foreigner's confused gestures. Daniel's stomach tightened. He recognized the language English, the same words he had whispered to the candlelight at night. His heart beat faster. Could he really try to speak to him? Could he, the boy who had been laughed at so many times, actually help this stranger? Fear pressed against him, memories of past embarrassment rushing back. The laughter of classmates, the teacher's dismissal, the mocking whispers all came to mind. What if he made a mistake? What if the villagers laughed at him again? His hands shook, and for a moment he thought of retreating, of hiding behind the crowded stalls like he usually did. But a quiet voice rose inside him, steady and strong. "You are brave. You can do this." Daniel took a deep breath, straightened his shoulders, and stepped forward. "Excuse me," he said softly. "You lost?" The stranger turned quickly, relief washing over his face. Yes, I am lost. I need bus. Town?" He pointed to his map and then toward the road. Daniel's mouth went dry. His heart raced. He thought carefully, recalling the English words he had practiced countless nights. "Bus. That way. Go straight. Then left," he said, pointing toward the road. The man's eyes lit up with gratitude. "Ah, thank you. Thank you, my friend." He shook Daniel's hand warmly, and for the first time, Daniel felt the weight of his efforts in a new way. He had spoken, and someone understood him. His words had meaning. The villagers watched silently, some wide-eyed in surprise. The boy they had once mocked, the one they had dismissed as silly, had just helped a stranger. The laughter that had haunted Daniel's school days felt distant, powerless. The traveler smiled once more before walking down the road Daniel had shown him. "Your English, very good," he called over his shoulder. Daniel felt his cheeks flush, not with shame this time, but with pride. For the first time, he understood what it meant to make a difference, even with small words. That evening, he ran home to tell his mother. Her tired eyes shone as she listened, pride and relief mixing in her expression. "See, Daniel?" she said softly, placing her hand on his shoulder. "Your effort matters. You are brave." Daniel held his torn book close that night and relit his small candle. The flickering light seemed brighter than before, reflecting the spark of confidence growing in his chest. He had learned something that words alone could not capture. Even a small voice, spoken with courage, could reach the world. And as he drifted to sleep, Daniel promised himself he would continue, study harder, and never let fear stop him again. The journey was just beginning, and this small success had shown him that his efforts had real value. Chapter 5. The Weight of Poverty. The days grew harder for Daniel. The small spark of confidence from helping the traveler still burned inside him, but life's weight pressed down relentlessly. His mother had fallen ill, her cough deep and persistent, her hands trembling as she tried to carry on with daily chores. Each day, Daniel watched her struggle, his heart aching with helplessness. Money became the constant worry. Every coin mattered more than ever. Daniel rose before sunrise to help neighbors at the market. carrying heavy baskets of vegetables, rice, and firewood. His arms ached, his back throbbed, and by the end of the day, his legs felt like lead. Sometimes he barely had time to eat, and the hunger gnawed at him, making every step feel heavier. And yet, there was his dream learning English, reading his little torn book, imagining a future beyond the village, but now it felt like a luxury. Could he really study when his mother needed care, when coins were so scarce, when every hour mattered for survival? He felt torn in two directions, pulled by necessity and desire. One afternoon, after another long day at the market, he sat on the dusty ground behind a stall. He watched the villagers pass, carrying their own burdens, and he felt the world pressing down. Sweat ran down his face, and the basket beside him seemed impossibly heavy. For the first time, doubt crept into his mind. Maybe dreams were for others, not for boys like him. Maybe English was a luxury he could not afford. That night, he returned home, exhausted and sore. His mother lay resting, weak but smiling faintly when she saw him. Daniel lit the small candle and opened his book, but his hands shook. The words blurred before his eyes. He traced them slowly with his fingers, whispering them under his breath, but the usual spark, the light of possibility, felt dim. "Can I continue?" he whispered softly to himself. "Or should I stop? Maybe this dream is too big. Maybe it is not for me." The candle flickered, casting shadows across the walls. The torn pages felt fragile, almost like they were holding the weight of his hope. Daniel's chest felt tight, as if the burden of poverty, responsibility, and exhaustion pressed down all at once. The boy who had once spoken to the traveler, who had felt the thrill of being understood, now wondered if he could continue at all. Yet, even in that heavy silence, a tiny voice stirred within him. The memory of his mother's proud smile, the whisper of encouragement from nights spent by candlelight, and the first taste of success he had felt with the traveler reminded him that he had come this far. Still, the struggle of the day left him weary, and for a moment it felt almost impossible to keep going. Daniel closed the book slowly and rested his head against the wall. Hunger, fatigue, and worry pressed down on him like stones. He could not see the path forward clearly, only the difficulty in front of him. And in that quiet, heavy moment, he came closest to giving up, wondering if dreams could survive when life demanded everything else. Chapter 6. The Darkest Night. The night was cold and silent. Daniel sat outside his small house, the dirt floor cold beneath him, the stars distant and dim above. His hands trembled as he held his little English book. For the first time, he thought of throwing it away. The pages, once full of hope, now seemed heavy, mocking him with words he could not fully use. "Dreams don't fill empty stomachs," he whispered to the darkness, his voice sharp with anger and frustration. His stomach ached with hunger, and his body felt heavy from the long hours at the market. Everything he had worked for seemed so small, so distant compared to the struggles of daily life. Tears came unbidden, running down his cheeks. He buried his face in his hands, feeling the weight of despair pressing down. Maybe the laughter of the past, the ridicule, and the struggle of poverty had been right. Maybe dreams were only for others, not for a boy like him. But then, in the quiet, memories flickered through his mind. The traveler's thankful smile at the market, the way someone had understood him, had trusted him, had valued him. His mother's soft voice, her hand on his shoulder, saying, "You are brave, my son." Those memories pierced the darkness, small but bright, like stars breaking through storm clouds. Daniel took a shaky breath and looked at his book again. The pages were torn, the words faded, but they were still there. And so was he. With trembling hands, he opened the book and traced the familiar words. Slowly, deliberately, he whispered them aloud. Hope, dream, future. Each word felt fragile at first, but with each repetition, courage returned, quiet but steady. He realized that bravery was not the absence of fear or hardship. Bravery was choosing to continue, even when everything inside him screamed to give up. Hunger, fatigue, and worry were real, but they could not extinguish the small flame that had carried him this far. That night, Daniel made a silent promise to himself. He would not quit. He would keep learning, keep dreaming, and keep speaking, even in the shadows. This darkest night would not define him. Instead, it would become the moment he chose courage again, the moment his small but fierce determination took root. Chapter 7. A New Teacher, a New Road. The days after that darkest night felt different for Daniel. The weight of poverty and exhaustion still pressed on him, but his small spark of determination refused to die. He returned to his studies each evening, whispering words by candlelight, practicing pronunciation, and imagining a world beyond the village. And then, one quiet morning, something remarkable happened. A retired teacher, Mr. Lin, noticed him. Mr. Lin had lived in the village for decades, teaching generations of children before retiring to a small, quiet life. He watched Daniel from across the market, seeing the boy carry heavy baskets by day and study diligently by night. There was something in Daniel's persistence that moved him. One afternoon, he approached the boy, leaning on his cane. "You study English alone?" Mr. Lin asked, his voice calm but full of curiosity. Daniel's eyes widened. "Yes, I try," he said quietly, unsure if he could speak correctly. The teacher smiled gently. "May I help you?" Daniel felt a mix of excitement and fear. Help? After all the shame, the ridicule, the moments he had almost given up, could he accept guidance without embarrassment? But something inside him said yes. With a nod, he agreed. From that day on, Mr. Lin guided him with simple lessons and old notebooks, teaching him words, phrases, and pronunciation. Each lesson was small but meaningful. They practiced slowly, focusing on clarity and understanding rather than speed. Mr. Lin's patience was endless, and Daniel began to notice changes. The words he once stumbled over rolled smoothly off his tongue. Sentences that had been short and halting grew longer, fuller, and more confident. As Daniel's skill grew, so did his courage. He began speaking to villagers, answering simple questions from travelers, and even helping younger children who struggled with their own studies. He would gather them around in the evenings, using his candlelight to read aloud, teaching the words he had learned. The children's eyes lit up as they repeated the new words, and Daniel felt a new kind of pride. He was no longer only a student. He had become a teacher, a guide, and a small light in their world. The joy of learning with Mr. Lin and the satisfaction of helping others transformed Daniel. The loneliness he had once felt while whispering to a candle became replaced with connection. The laughter that had once mocked him faded into memory, replaced by the respect and gratitude of those he helped. Every day, Daniel felt a growing belief that his efforts mattered. that his words could carry him far beyond the small house and narrow streets of his village. Yet he never forgot the struggles that had brought him here. Each lesson with Mr. Lin reminded him that every word learned was a step toward a bigger world. Every phrase spoken was a small victory over fear, and every act of teaching others strengthened his own understanding and confidence. The contrast between the boy who had hidden from ridicule and the boy who now shared knowledge with others was stark and powerful. With this guidance, Daniel began to imagine new possibilities. He thought about conversations with travelers, opportunities beyond the village, and doors that might open if he continued learning. His English was no longer a dream whispered in secret. It was becoming a skill, a bridge to the future he had once only imagined. As night fell and he closed his notebook, Daniel felt a quiet satisfaction. The path ahead would still have obstacles, but now he had direction, support, and a growing belief in himself. The small boy who had whispered words by candlelight was transforming into someone ready to face the world, one lesson at a time. Chapter 8. The First Big Test. The market was bustling as usual, the air thick with the smells of spices, fruit, and fresh bread. Daniel carried his basket of vegetables, moving carefully between the stalls. Today, however, the routine felt different. A traveler had arrived, a man who spoke English quickly and with unfamiliar words. He seemed confused and frustrated, asking for directions and help. Daniel noticed the panic in the traveler's eyes and felt a rush of both fear and opportunity. For a moment, Daniel froze. He remembered the laughter of his classmates, the pointing fingers, the teacher telling him dreams were useless. The old fear bubbled up in his chest. What if he made a mistake? What if the traveler did not understand him? What if everyone laughed again? His palms were sweaty, his heart racing. Then he recalled the candlelight nights, the whispered words of practice, and Mr. Lin's patient guidance. He remembered the traveler from weeks before, whose grateful smile had lit something inside him. Daniel took a deep breath, straightened his shoulders, and approached the man. "Excuse me," he said softly but firmly. "You want buy bread?" The traveler's face brightened. "Yes, bread. How much? Where is the baker?" Daniel repeated the question slowly, translating between the man and the villagers. He guided him to the correct stall, helped him ask for prices, and clarified misunderstandings. Each word he spoke felt deliberate, careful, but the sentences flowed more easily than ever before. Slowly, Daniel realized something incredible. He was doing it. He was helping. He was understood. By the end of the exchange, the traveler handed Daniel a few coins as a small thank you. It was the first time Daniel had ever earned money directly because of his English. His hands shook as he counted the coins, a mixture of pride and disbelief filling him. He had turned the knowledge he had been quietly cultivating into something real, something tangible. As Daniel looked around, he noticed a few familiar faces. The same classmates who had once mocked his accent and stumbled words now stared at him with surprise. Their whispers were quiet this time, but there was a hint of respect in their eyes. Daniel felt a warm, strange feeling in his chest, not pride in showing off, but humility in understanding that his hard work had begun to matter. He did not boast. He knew this was only the beginning. One successful translation did not erase years of struggle, nor did it solve all his problems, but it was proof that persistence worked. Proof that the quiet hours by candlelight, the careful practice, and the courage to continue had value. Walking home that evening, Daniel felt a new sense of possibility. If he could do this with a single traveler in the market, what might be possible tomorrow? What doors could his English open? What worlds could he reach? The first test had been passed, and it sparked a vision of a future filled with opportunity, one word at a time. Chapter 9. The Road Beyond the Village. Daniel's world had begun to grow, one small step at a time. After his first success helping the traveler, he felt a quiet determination stirring inside him. The market, once a place of struggle and shame, had become a stage for opportunity, and now he wanted more. He wanted to see beyond the familiar paths of his village, to speak with people who knew the world in ways he had only imagined. Each day, Daniel saved the few coins he could. He skipped small treats, walked instead of taking rides, and carried extra loads for neighbors when they offered a little money in return. Every coin went into a small, worn pouch hidden beneath his pillow. His goal was simple but meaningful: to buy a second-hand English dictionary, small enough to carry, big enough to open doors. Finally, one morning, he held the dictionary in his hands. Its pages were slightly bent, the cover scuffed, and the words a little faded, but to Daniel, it was a treasure. He traced each letter carefully, learning new words and phrases, connecting them to the ones he had practiced with his teacher. With every page, his confidence grew, and the boundaries of his small world began to stretch further. Daniel also began traveling to the nearby town. It was only a few miles away, but to him it felt enormous. A place of strangers, different shops, and new voices. Here, he practiced English with travelers and shopkeepers, asking questions, repeating sentences, and correcting himself quietly. Sometimes he stumbled, sometimes they laughed at his accent, but often they smiled, corrected him gently, and continued the conversation. Every encounter made him bolder. Back home, his mother's health improved slowly, and with each improvement, her smile grew. She watched him study and practice, her tired eyes softening with pride. "You are brave, Daniel," she said one evening, squeezing his shoulder. "Your heart carries you farther than your hands or your pockets ever could." Her words reminded him that even as life remained difficult, courage and perseverance could expand the possibilities around him. The contrast between his old life and his new experiences became more and more visible. In the small village, he had once felt invisible, overlooked, and limited. Now, with each word learned, each conversation had with a foreigner, and each careful page turned in his dictionary, he felt the power in his voice. He was no longer just a poor boy defined by hunger or broken walls. He was someone capable of reaching out, connecting, and creating change, even in small ways. His imagination also grew. He pictured himself speaking fluently, traveling to cities he had never seen, and helping others as his teacher had helped him. Each step on the dusty roads, each coin saved, each page studied, became part of a larger journey. Daniel began to realize that the limitations of poverty were real, but they could be challenged by a brave heart and consistent effort. Even as the sun set over the village, casting long shadows across the narrow streets, Daniel felt a sense of expansion he had never known. The small house, the dirt floor, and the tired walls no longer defined him. His words had begun to define him, giving him wings to explore, to learn, and to hope. He returned home that evening, dictionary in hand, ready to practice by candlelight. His heart felt lighter, and his dreams felt closer, not because life had become easy, but because he had grown strong enough to meet it. Daniel's journey beyond the village was just beginning, and the brave heart that carried him promised a world far larger than he had ever imagined. Chapter 10. A Poor Life, a Brave Heart. Daniel sat on the small wooden bench outside his house, the evening sun painting the village in warm shades of orange and gold. The wind carried the familiar scents of dirt, wood smoke, and freshly baked bread. He looked at the narrow streets he had walked countless times, the small market stalls where he had carried heavy baskets, and the tiny house that had once felt like the boundary of his world. He thought back to the boy he had been, the boy who went to bed hungry, who trembled when classmates laughed, who hid in the shadows of his own dreams. That boy had carried a small, torn book by candlelight, whispering words no one else believed mattered. That boy had almost given up more times than he could count, crushed by poverty, shame, and the weight of responsibility. Yet here he was now, still poor, yes, but not powerless. His English had become more than words. It had become a bridge to possibility. He could help travelers, converse with strangers, teach younger children, and even earn a little money to support his mother. The small victories had accumulated, forming a foundation stronger than any riches could buy. Daniel smiled softly, remembering the first traveler he had helped, the first coins he had earned, and the first proud glance from his mother. Each memory was a testament to the fact that courage and persistence mattered more than comfort or wealth. Bravery had carried him farther than hunger or hardship could hold him back. He looked at the candle in his hand, small and flickering, and felt its quiet warmth mirror the flame inside himself, the same flame that had burned through fear, ridicule, and exhaustion. Poverty had limited his surroundings, but it had never limited his heart. It had never stopped him from imagining, from trying, from believing that one day he could change his life. Daniel's voice, steady and calm, seemed to speak not just to himself, but to every listener who might hear his story. Bravery is not about money. It is not about having a perfect life or avoiding hardship. Bravery is choosing to keep going when life is hard, choosing to act even when fear is loud, choosing to believe in yourself even when no one else does. He paused, thinking of the countless nights spent under candlelight, the heavy baskets at the market, the long walks to the nearby town, and the encouragement of the teacher who had seen something in him. "I am still poor," he said softly, "but I am not small. My heart has carried me farther than wealth ever could, and if I can do it, so can you." The village around him grew quiet as the sun disappeared behind the hills. Daniel closed his eyes for a moment, feeling a deep, unshakable sense of hope. He knew the road ahead would still have challenges, poverty, illness, and obstacles, but he had learned a powerful truth. The strength to change your life comes from persistence, courage, and belief. He opened his eyes, looking toward the horizon. The boy who once hid in shadows now imagined the future with clarity. Words had given him freedom, determination had given him direction, and hope had given him a heart brave enough to move forward. As Daniel stood and stepped into the fading light, he carried with him a message for everyone listening. Your circumstances do not define your potential. Your challenges do not decide your worth. Your heart, your effort, and your courage carry you farther than any obstacle ever could. Thank you for watching Daniel's journey on Learn English by Daily. His story shows that even in difficult circumstances, courage, persistence, and learning can open new doors. Daniel started with nothing but a small book and a big dream, and step by step, he turned his life around. He reminds us that learning English or any skill is not only about words, it's about believing in yourself and taking consistent action every day. If Daniel can rise above hunger, fear, and ridicule, so can you. Every word you practice, every sentence you repeat, and every story you listen to brings you closer to your own goals. Remember, learning English is a journey, not a race. Small daily efforts add up and can change your life in ways you cannot imagine. Here on Learn English by Daily, we share stories like Daniel's to inspire you, improve your listening, reading, and speaking skills, and help you see that your dreams are always worth pursuing. Make it a habit to spend a few minutes every day practicing, reading, or repeating new words. Your heart, like Daniel's, can carry you farther than any obstacle. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications because we upload new motivational and educational videos every single day. Keep following along, keep learning, and keep believing in your own brave heart. The next story could be the spark that changes your life, just like Daniel's journey.